This conference will now be recorded.
Thanks. But otherwise, you want to stay muted. Okay, so today, we're going to be for this webinar, we're going to be talking about the SNAP Employment and Training Program, and my name is Nick Cott. I'm from Seattle Jobs Initiative, go by SGI, and so SGI is working in collaboration with Food Nutrition Services (FNS) with the state of North Dakota Department of Human Services to help them build out and expand their SNAP employment and training services in the state of North Dakota. And so what we want to do today is provide you with an informational webinar on the SNAP Employment and Training Program. We're going to provide an overview. We think this will be of interest to community-based organizations, to community and technical colleges, various workforce providers, and other stakeholders in the state. So you're going to hear from me. I'll be talking about the SNAP ENT program. In just a second, I'm going to turn things over to Deb Kramer, who's going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this from the perspective of North Dakota. You'll also hear briefly from Marcy Foster, who is from Office of Employment and Training and Food Nutrition Services. So we'll do the webinar. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end. You know, we've got about an hour or so hopefully this is helpful. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today and your interest. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Deb Kramer, North Dakota, and you can get us started.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks everyone for joining. The SNAP Employment and Training Program provides education, training, and related supportive services to eligible SNAP recipients. This creates a skilled workforce that benefits both the state and the citizens of North Dakota. Currently in the state of North Dakota, there are two SNAP Employment and Training programs. The North Dakota Department of Human Services contracts with Job Service North Dakota to administer the Basic Employment Skills Training Program, which is also known as BEST. And this is administered in both Burleigh and Cass counties. Job Service North Dakota has been the provider of the BEST program for the past several years. And since October 1st of 2018, the BEST program has served an average of 86 individuals each month. The North Dakota Department of Human Services also contracts with Community Options to administer the ND Works program, and that is administered in Grand Forks and Ramsey counties. This program started in August of 2018 as a pilot program and is currently serving 110 SNAP recipients each month. So that's just a basic overview of the employment and training programs that we have currently in North Dakota. I will turn this back over to Nick.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Deb. So, Deb, before you get off, I just want to make sure that people can see the screen okay. Just make sure, if you can just do a quick check for me, maybe Deb. Or...
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, looks okay to you then. Good. Okay, great. Thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, good. So, great. So we're going to be, as I said, we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about the SNAP Employment and Training Program, and a particular focus of today's presentation is going to be on some of the programmatic and funding opportunities that are available through SNAP Employment and Training. So I believe this is going to be of interest to a number of people, but in particular people who work for community-based organizations, community and technical colleges, workforce entities, as I mentioned earlier. So let me sort of get us started here with the actual presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about what SNAP Employment and Training actually is and the purpose of it. And to get us started, I'm actually going to turn things over to Marcy Foster from FNS to talk about the SNAP Employment Training Program more from the national perspective, and then we'll go more into the local perspective. So Marcy, I'll turn things over to you for a second.
Sure. So this is Marcy. I'm in the national office right outside of DC. I'm happy to be here today with you guys. So the SNAP Employment and Training Program is a federally funded national program, state-administered program. It is the purpose is, and this is the statutory purpose, is to assist members of SNAP households in gaining skills, training, work, or experience that will increase their ability to obtain regular employment. That is specifically listed in our statute. So within that, you're seeing a lot of things. People have to be on SNAP to be in SNAP employment and training, but also the program is really diverse in terms of what it can offer people, as long as the goal is to obtain regular, what we call regular employment. So gaining skills, training, work, or experience. And there's, I think Nick will talk about allowable activities a little bit later. But there's a lot of flexibility that states have to operate a program that makes sense for the state and the communities that are in that state. So all states are required to operate a program, and they have to submit an annual E&T plan that delineates some of the specifics about what they've chosen for their program. But it can be different in every state. However, every single state has to operate a program, so it's not an optional It's not optional. SNAP E&T is part of a larger workforce development strategy nationally. So, we see SNAP E&T as fitting into a niche of the ability to serve the highly barriered, lowest income workers and unemployed workers and people who are struggling to get back into the labor market. Maybe those people who are not as well served by other systems, because SNAP E&T can provide such a plethora of services. And I think Nick will again talk about the different types of services that are allowable to be offered. Most notably, we can offer not just training and support and skills and work experience, but states are also required to fund supportive services. So things that people would need to be able to get to a job or to get to training or to be successful in training or to overcome barriers that they would need to successfully complete that training. So I've already talked about the fact that states have considerable flexibility, but I will talk about the dimensions of flexibility so states can decide sort of where geographically they want the program, whether they require participants to participate in SNAP employment and training as a condition of getting benefits, or whether they just make it available as an option for participants who want to increase their self-sufficiency. States can decide which types of programs they offer. So I know we have a lot of different types of providers or CBOs on the phone. So states can operate programs and run their own sorts of whatever sort of the state needs to do to select their providers. States make those decisions about who provides services in their program. So if we want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
But nationally, we do have a overarching vision for the program. So SNAP E&T is not a new program. It's been around for the better part of 3 decades. It has changed over time. So in the last several years, we really FNS, the Food and Nutrition Service, which is the agency of the Department of Agriculture that administers the regular SNAP program, formerly the food stamp program. It is FNS's vision that we really want to see SNAP employment and training programs strengthened and expanded. We've seen this in recent farm bills, most recently our 2018 Farm Bill that reauthorized the program and added new allowable activities and added a little bit more funding. But really, we want to see states growing their program by leveraging what we call 50/50 reimbursement funds through third-party providers. I think there's going to be a discussion about that a little bit later. But essentially, our program is unique in the fact that we don't just have federal 100% grant funds to states, but we have the ability to reimburse states and their providers 50% of what they spend on SNAP employment and training, so that over time, states can grow the program, and even states who have limited state funding can leverage private funding through providers to grow the SNAP employment and training program and serve more people. We also are very connected to conversations about best practices for serving low-skilled, low-income, and highly barriered people. We want to see people receiving robust training and career pathway services, not just light touch services or services that simply help people meet work requirements. We're really looking to help people gain self-sufficiency over time, and there's a lot of evidence that shows sort of more robust services coupled with job search can help them do that, can help participants gain self-sufficiency over the longer term. Um, so those key elements of best practices that we're looking at are employer-driven models, things that are connected to skills that employers training programs that are connected to skills that employers value in the specific communities that they're in. Skill-based trainings, things that help people gain skills over time for a specific occupation. Intensive case management, robust supportive services, that falls under the bucket of things that we require states to provide to participants. Career pathways, bridge programs, sector partnerships, all of those buzzwords that, we've heard about in this last 10, 15 years about, what are the best practices for low-skilled, low-income people. We want to see in the SNAP Employment and Training Program as well. So if we go to, I think the next slide is ours. Okay, so, and we're trying to put our money where our mouth is, so we have invested in the SNAP to Skills project, which has been around since 2015. We've worked with 22 states through the SNAP to Skills project. And SJI, Seattle Jobs Initiative, is the contractor for this project, and worked with 22 states to really improve their program, expand their program, take a look at best practices, take a look at what they're currently offering and looking at their goals. That's what North Dakota is in. That's what your state is in at this time, at this year. We've had 22 states over the last 4 years and have seen really good progress in the majority of those states. So I'm from the Office of Employment and Training in the national office, and that's where sort of all of these national activities come from. But there are regional analysts that I'm sure many of you are aware of in each region, and your region, of course, is Mountain Plains. And there's a regional analyst in each of those regions, or will be, to help expressly with the purpose of growing the SNAP Employment and Training Program. So we are a resource at the national office, of course, but we also have regions that can be a first point of contact as well. So I think that's it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marcy. That's wonderful. It gives us a really good sort of background and context from the national perspective. So I want to, in some ways, continue on what Marcy was talking about, and I think Marcy, talked about the fact that a number of people on SNAP obviously do work, maybe have worked somewhat recently, but oftentimes work in low-paying jobs that have irregular work schedules or temporary, or in some cases, people on SNAP have worked very, very little or maybe not at all. And so SNAP Employment and Training is really about helping SNAP recipients in these types of situations improve their situation. And it's really all about helping to address this skills and education gap, because a number of people on SNAP who are working are not working in the better jobs, the good jobs, because of their their lack of educational achievement, the skills that they don't have that employers are looking for. And so this is really an initiative to help people address those gaps and move forward. So SNAP, as a assistance with food and nutrition, provides some good stability in that perspective, but SNAP Employment and Training really helps people grow and develop the skills they need to be more stable and have a brighter future. So a couple of the basics. So who's eligible for SNAP Employment and Training? So a SNAP recipient is somebody who's on SNAP, is receiving SNAP, and they're receiving SNAP in the month that they participate in the program. But I think one of the most important things is that SNAP Employment Training is really for people who are on SNAP but not on TANF. If you're on TANF and SNAP, which a number of people are, TANF has its own work program available for TANF recipients and have for a number of years. So really, this is really about people that are just on SNAP. And actually, if you look at the numbers, there's a lot more people that are just on SNAP that are on SNAP and TANF. So that's sort of the broader population that we're looking at. So we want to talk about the SNAP Employment Training funding, and Marcy mentioned that a little bit in her overview. So basically, there is this, what we would consider what we call 100% funding. These are formula funds that come to each state to support SNAP employment and training. So North Dakota gets money, every state gets money, these funds. But the amount that states receive in the 100% bucket they provide a good sort of source of funding, but they really don't meet the full need of the SNAP population when it comes to employment and training services. Where the real opportunity here is through this 50-50 mechanism, which it's called 50-50 reimbursement, third-party reimbursement model. It's got a couple different names. And the reason why it's called the 50-50 funds is because the way it works, I'm going to try and describe it in a very simple way, and we'll go into a little more detail, is if a community-based organization, a community and technical college that's contracted with a state, if you're spending non-federal funds that aren't matched with another federal source, and you're serving people on SNAP that have been approved for SNAP by the state SNAP agency, and you're providing what FNS considers eligible components, and we'll take a look at those, then the dollars that you're spending, those non-federal dollars spent, can be reimbursed at a rate of up to 50%. So very simple, and it's never this simple in practice, way to look at it is if an organization was spending $200,000 of non-federal funds to serve SNAP recipients, providing approved ENT services, then they could potentially receive an additional $100,000 on top of that in federal reimbursement. And those dollars can be used by that organization really in a variety of ways. But if they choose to spend them in the future on their SNAP ENT program, they can be eligible for additional reimbursement in following years. So that's kind of the funding model. And I know I kind of went through that quickly, made it sound a little more simple than it probably is, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. So the other thing that I will point out is that when we talk about these 50-50 funds, they fall into two buckets. One bucket we call administrative reimbursements, and that's really those are the funds that cover your staffing, your services, your programming. When I say services, like your training, your direct services to SNAP recipients. The other bucket are what we call participant reimbursements or supportive services. So those are things like money to assist with transportation, with work clothes, books, supplies, fees, all of those types of things that are necessary for people to be successful in employment and training programs. And so we call those either participant reimbursements or supportive services. And again, the 100% funds, they cover administrative expenses, so they staff staff things at the state level, help with the planning, overall operations. They can, in some cases, be used for direct program expenses, but again, the dollar amounts are not significant, and so that money doesn't go too far. In particular, when you think of the number of people on SNAP that are really, in a position to benefit from employment and training services. So it's really these 50-50 or the 50% funds where the opportunity lies. And so, one thing I'll say here is that, I work for Seattle Jobs Initiative here in the state of Washington, and the state of Washington has been working with this model since the year 2005, and we've had a lot of success, and that's one reason why we're able to provide technical assistance. We can really share a lot of our learnings and benefits. And so in the state of Washington, which is, obviously a bigger state than North Dakota, at least from a population standpoint, all of our community colleges, all 33 community and technical colleges are receiving 50% funds. We have about 60 community-based organizations that are also receiving these funds. And so these are, between the colleges and the community-based organizations, they're serving a large number of people, and they're using all of the non-federal funds that they can to provide services and to draw down these reimbursements. So we have a very robust program, and we're able to, offer quite a bit to people that are on SNAP. So one of the things that these 50% funds can be used that the 100% funds can't be used for is they can be used on supportive services and participant reimbursements, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we've been talking about this whole program is the 50-50 model or the third-party reimbursement model, but this 50% reimbursement. So there is an exception to this rule, and that is, and I have this here on the screen, and I'm going to read it so I say it correctly. But there's a different reimbursement rate essentially for tribal entities, and so essentially FNS will pay each agency of a state government administering a SNAP on a reservation 75% of all approved administrative costs, such as certification, insurance, outreach. You can see see the list. But so essentially what this means is that for a tribal program or tribal entity, there's even a bigger advantage than the 50% reimbursement. Again, the tribe would need to be using non-federal dollars, serving approved SNAP recipients, and delivering the services that fall under SNAP employment and training. But this is something to think about, in particular, if you're involved in a tribal entity and providing services. So again, the third-party partnership is really an entity that's operating using this 50-50 reimbursement. So I think one of the important things to remember about this is, if you are a third-party partner, that means you have a contract with your state to do this kind of work. So all of this work, no matter, even if you're already serving SNAP recipients using non-federal dollars, providing the right services, this all goes through your state. You have a contract with the state, and the state draws down the reimbursement from FNS. But so that's just another sort of aspect to how all of this works. But again, these reimbursements will come into the third-party partner, and the third-party partner can use those dollars in kind of a variety of ways, oftentimes to continue to grow and expand and strengthen their SNAP employment and training program in the future. So mentioned the need to use non-federal funds, and so here's a list of what you might consider common non-federal funding sources. So state, county, city funds that you might be receiving, might be available, that are directed, that you can use to provide employment and training services. Private donations, foundations. If you have a social enterprise, a social venture revenue type of model, that's another option. There's one sort of official federal funding stream that does meet the eligibility requirement for non-federal funds, and that's community development block grants, CDBG dollars. So if you happen to get these dollars and you're using them on employment and training, or could be using them, that might be a potential way to draw down reimbursement if this is something that you end up doing. And then, for government entities, it would be in kind. And then there's a number of, and these are all going to look kind of different from state to state, but these sort of special initiatives within states for retraining, low-income student support, tuition set-asides, special projects for more specific populations. These are all sources of non-federal funding, and there could be others. I think this is something that I would encourage everybody who's kind of thinking about this opportunity to kind of think about your funding streams and where that money is coming from and what the source is. The one thing I will say is that these, and I think you in particular have to look at your state, county, and city funds, maybe some of even the worker retraining dollars. They can't be; these dollars have to be clean dollars, and that I mean they can't be used to match another federal project. And in some cases, some of these state dollars may actually be tied to your TANF block grant. So those are things you have to take a closer look at. But for the most part, a lot of entities have some level of non-federal funding to consider and to work with, and oftentimes a fair amount of flexibility around how those dollars are used. So this is really just how the third-party reimbursement kind of works more in practice. So the state would contract with local partners, provide employment and training services, and I think in North Dakota you have one third-party partner right now that the state is contracting with. The local partners use their non-federal funds to pay for allowable expenses. They submit an invoice or claim to the state, and they're reimbursed by the state, but the dollars actually come through the feds. So it's really a pass-through process. So I mentioned a couple times SNAP Employment and Training Services, and so what do those involve or include? And so one of the terms that's used in SNAP Employment Training is the term components. You might so it's employment and training components, and we have a list of the components, and a lot of them are very familiar, services that you would find within an employment and training arena. So job search, job readiness training, basic ed, vocational training, work experience programs, pre-apprenticeship, and integrated case management and job retention. So what I will say about this list is that there's a number of sort of models and sort of different versions that we see out across the country, service delivery models that can fit into a number of these different categories. There are definitely parameters around them, but they can be fairly broad. The other thing that's important is that there's an expectation that there will be some level of case management integrated within these programs. So everybody involved in employment and training will have an employment assessment and a plan, some follow-ups, some notes, some level of case management. Now, in some cases and in some models, SNAP Employment and Training is able to fund some fairly intensive and fairly involved case management models that are integrated with various employment services. And I think that's one of the really nice aspects to SNAP Employment and Training, and it's particularly helpful in addressing people with more complex situations, people with more specific challenges. If it's people coming out of the criminal justice system, people that are unstably housed or homeless, non-custodial parents, the individuals that have more complex situations oftentimes need a higher level of case management and support that's blended in with employment and training services. So on the other side of the screen, we have these, the supportive services that I mentioned, and these are just examples. This list can actually go on to be fairly long. It's really things that are reasonable and necessary and directly tied to employment and training. But again, if you as an entity are providing these types of supportive services with non-federal dollars as a part of your program to individuals, then the dollars used would be eligible for reimbursement. And some of these items are not big ticket items, but they're very essential and they add up. And if you're operating a program, so this is kind of again another sort of really good opportunity. Now, at the same time, the state itself oftentimes will provide some amount of supportive services, which is great if that's the case. But as well, community organizations, community technical colleges oftentimes can offer these as well. So if they can, then they can draw down the reimbursement. So this is a diagram that I think is kind of a helpful thing because I'm imagining you're listening to this and kind of thinking, well, so what does this have to do with my organization? Does this really fit? And this diagram is one way to kind of think about that. So really, what I would encourage people to think about is, based on what you've heard, are you using the right funds, federal funds? Do you have the right capacity? So, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is it's state and federal dollars, and so you need the capacity to manage this type of program and grant. Do you have the right participants? So are you serving SNAP individuals that are not on TANF? And do you have the right services? And so, if you can check off all these circles, then you're probably well aligned. And if this were an opportunity for you, you could be doing this kind of work. And that circle in the middle, that opportunity for the reimbursement, that's something you could look to and potentially grow over time. So, mentioned sort of the right administrative capacity. So this is kind of touching on that. And so this is really answering the question, I think, of, so how do you get your SNAP employment and training clients? How does that really happen? And so in general, and this kind of can work a little bit differently from state to state, but you're going to get your referrals in two ways, a direct referral or a reverse referral. So in a direct referral, that's essentially the state SNAP agency will have somebody that's on SNAP, that's been approved for SNAP, and they can essentially refer that person to you for employment and training services. Pretty straightforward. The nice thing there is you know that this is a person who's on SNAP, that's been referred, they're eligible, they're enrolled from the state SNAP agency's perspective. The other option is what we call reverse referral. And essentially how that works is if your organization, again, whether it's a college, community-based organization, a workforce type program, if you're serving somebody already or somebody's coming in your door, then you can identify whether or not this is a person who's on SNAP or potentially eligible for SNAP. And you can do this in a variety of ways. You can simply ask them, are you on SNAP? In some cases, people don't feel comfortable asking that, but they do collect information about income levels and things like that. But anyway, so as a third-party provider, you identify individuals that are coming into your door, or you're currently serving, that are potentially SNAP ENT eligible, potentially on SNAP. Then there's a process of then contacting the state SNAP agency to confirm whether that person is indeed on SNAP. And if they are, then getting them officially enrolled in your ENT program, or if they're not, starting the process of getting them to apply for SNAP and become eligible. So, so again, it's either the state SNAP agency's got somebody on SNAP, they're sending them to you, or somebody's coming in your door or in your service already, and you have this conversation and you start a process with your state SNAP agency to confirm or get them involved in or get them on SNAP. So that's really those are the two methods. The reverse referral option is really beneficial in a lot of ways, because I would guess that our experience has been that a lot of community-based organizations, community technical colleges, are already seeing a number of people that are on SNAP or eligible for SNAP in their programs. So so they're kind of there already, and you're probably serving them in different ways already with the right type of services. So so sometimes getting started is not as you've got sort of a pool of people to begin with already. So again, this is really just what I talked about, this idea of verification of eligibility. So the third party, which is CBO, community college, needs to contact the SNAP agency for a SNAP ENT referral. If they're not eligible, they might be receiving TANF. They may not be eligible at all, but or if they haven't yet applied for SNAP, then you start that process. So again, these are the types of things you have to kind of manage, and again, it gets back at that capacity to manage all of this. And what I will tell you is, these programs, they take some work and some effort to get started and up and running. But again, I'll just point to the state of Washington. We have 60 community-based organizations and 33 community colleges that all do this type of process. And so it is very doable. It does work. It is manageable. But like any new project or any funding source, it just takes some time to kind of get it set up and going and build it into your typical way of business. So a couple last comments here. We feel that the SNAP Employment and Training Program is really an opportunity to find and to tap into this sort of untapped potential. So a number of people on SNAP are working. They need to work at better jobs, need to make better money. Oftentimes they're coming to your programs already. So this is a program that I think gives you a funding mechanism and a structure to really serve those individuals better and address their needs more effectively. So and again, we've seen across the country that a number of organizations are already doing this type of work, but they're not yet involved in SNAP employment and training. And so in a sense, money's been left on the table, and by making this an opportunity, money doesn't get left on the table, and reimbursements can start flowing. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of benefits to this program, but I want to be responsible here and let you know that this is not a simple program. There are some challenges. There's some complexity. So, you have to, as we just talked about, you need to be able to verify person's SNAP eligibility. And that SNAP eligibility, they might be eligible in June, but, July, August, September, you got to make sure they're still eligible. So it's not just a one-shot deal. And as you're getting started in sort of putting together a budget, you need to be able to anticipate how many SNAP recipients you're actually going to be serving from year to year. And if you haven't, typically looked closely at who's on SNAP and who isn't, that can be challenging. So you have to kind of figure out how to get that started and anticipate that from year to year. You have to be able to identify and track your non-federal funding sources. And sometimes those sources come and go. You'll get new ones, and sometimes your old ones will phase out. So these are things you have to be able to do. But again, I think any organization that does a lot of sort of braided funding or operates with a lot of funding streams, is set up to do this type of thing. And the reimbursement model can, in some cases, especially for a smaller community-based organization, be a little bit of a challenge. It really depends on how you're looking at and how you're sort of thinking about using those reimbursements, because they may not come back to you right away. So you just have to be careful there, I think. So again, we just I want to talk about there's a lot of benefits, a lot of challenges, but at the same time, this is a really strong program. And again, I think it really provides a unique opportunity to meet a real broad range of needs. And we know the SNAP population is a broad group of people, and not one program, not one model is going to meet the needs of everybody. So it's an opportunity to really sort of support a robust range of options for communities. So again, I've talked about the benefits. I won't go through those again, but I guess the best practices, the types of things that I think are important to consider here is that this is a program about skills and building skills, getting people the credentials, the things that they need to really move themselves forward. And so it's really important to have that focus, and that this should really be seen as part of your overall workforce system and programming. And it's best to start small. You build your partnerships, you figure out your supportive services, you build those in, and you build on your administrative capacity. So this is not as you can maybe kind of see, this is not a funding model where you go out and start a new program. You actually get funded for a lot of the things you're already doing. And then as you get your reimbursement, you can build and strengthen your program. So it's not like a program where you're going to get $100,000, $200,000 to do something new. It's a reimbursement, so you get money as you provide these services. So you build on what you're doing, and then over time you can build it, you can expand and strengthen. So this is kind of what I have to say, and I tried to go through some of this stuff thoroughly, but briefly. So I did want to just say I want to go ahead and give people a chance to ask some questions. I think we've had a few questions come in through the chat box, so I will try to find those if I can. And I know there was a question about whether the PowerPoint would be available, and we can certainly share that. I would look to probably Michelle to do that in the state. But I do want to, if you have a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, and then I'm going to try and at the same time go through some of the questions that came into the chat box and respond to those. But any questions? Okay, so if not, here's a question that came into the chat box, and it's really about sort of the WIOA system, WIOA system in your state, and so that's something that's available to help people around employment and training. But the question I think here that's relevant to this discussion is, what if someone is on WIOA and SNAP? Can they utilize both? And the answer to that is yes. However, there needs to be a good, clear distinction between what WIOA is paying for and funding, and what SNAP might be funding and paying for. So it's possible to have somebody involved in both programs. We don't see that a lot, but it is an option. So, a potential option might be that somebody is receiving funding through WIOA for training, and maybe there's few or very, very little supportive services available with the federal dollars. If somebody's involved in SNAP employment and training, and there's some additional supportive services that can be funded through SNAP employment and training, that's a potential way that somebody could be involved in both programs. So the answer to that is yes, but of course you need to be very careful about how that's structured and funded. So here's another question, and this might be more a question for Deb or Michelle, somebody from DHS to answer. So the question is, so let's say someone is not SNAP eligible this month, and they apply for ENT and are denied. How long do they have to wait to reapply for SNAP for this program?
Hi, Nick. This is Michelle. If I understand the question correctly, they really don't apply for ENT services. They apply for SNAP, and then the SNAP program would refer them, or a third-party agency would refer them to the SNAP program.
Right, exactly. Yeah, thanks. So I think, what this might be sort of relevant to is, I don't know. I mean, if somebody, did show up in an organization and they're not on SNAP that month, they would not be eligible for employment and training, but they would have to start that process of applying for SNAP, and then once they've gone through that process, then they could potentially be eligible. Thanks. Okay, so here's another question, and I will read it and then hope we can answer it. So a person on SNAP wants to take a CNA course that costs $800 from the non-credit department at a community college. The person does not have the money to get registered for the course. How might this program help this person? So I'll give an answer, and Marcy, if you want to chime in, you're welcome. So in cases like this where there is a fee to take a program and a person doesn't have the money, then this, in my mind, this becomes most likely a financial aid question. So if a scenario sort of comes to be that this is a person who's on SNAP and eligible for SNAP employment and training, and if this community college is an ENT provider, and there is a non-federal source of money or financial aid that can pay for the fees, then the person could get into the class, and the organization, the community college, could then be eligible for reimbursement on these dollars. But really, I think, the fundamental question here is, this is kind of a financial aid question. Is there a source that could help this person pay for their tuition? And if it's a federal source, then it's a federal source. It wouldn't be eligible for reimbursement. If it's not a federal source, then there's that potential. So, I don't, Marcy, if you're on still, do you have any additions?
Well, I mean, the most important part of the question is that the provider is a SNAP ENT provider in the state. So that the state has determined, has gone through some sort of a process to select that provider, and that in fact the program that the person is applying to is part of the SNAP ENT program as well. In addition, SNAP ENT, like a lot of other tiny little federal funding streams, is the payer of last resort. So we would ask people not to exhaust their student loans, but certainly to apply for Pell or any other type of aid, federal aid that they might be eligible for, prior to using SNAP ENT. But again, that would be up to the state. This all goes through the state, not an individual.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, Marcy. Good. Another question is there an amount limit set for training for a SNAP recipient? And I think from the federal perspective, but correct me if I got this wrong, Marcy, there is not necessarily a limit for a dollar limit for the cost of training. Some states do set some limits and some guidelines. I think, generally speaking, the rates have to be fair and reasonable. They have to sort of line up with, what everybody else is paying. I mean, you can't charge more for SNAP ENT recipients than you would for anybody else.
Right.
That's how I would.
Federal appropriations laws would say it has to be reasonable and necessary, and what a prudent person would pay, which in a lot of programs is determined as what a prudent person would pay is what other people pay. So wouldn't charge SNAP ENT more than what another person on the street would pay.
Right. So there's another question here. Some of these are getting fairly detailed, but so the question is basically, what if somebody is going through a program and they become ineligible in the middle of the training, so they lose their SNAP eligibility? What happens? And essentially, this can work out in a few different ways. But first of all, this is one of the complexities of the program. People, an organization that's a SNAP ENT organization needs to be in communication with the state to continue to verify people's eligibility from month to month. Because that people do lose their eligibility at times, and if they're going through a program and they lose their eligibility, then then at the time that they lose their eligibility, then they may be able to continue on with the program, but the reimbursement, the SNAP ENT reimbursement, would probably come to an end, and there may be efforts to get them back on SNAP and get things started up again. But again, that's again part of the complexity of managing this type of program is being in good communication with the state to communicate eligibility. Okay, so there's another basic question. So how does one become an eligible provider for this program? And so Marcy actually just mentioned this a couple seconds ago. So and Marcy talked about this in the beginning as well. But so essentially in each state has the responsibility of operating an employment and training program. And if a state wants to bring on third-party partners, they can do that, and they go through a process of selecting eligible partners, community-based organizations, community technical colleges, and other eligible entities. So this is really something that originates from the state SNAP agency. One of the unique things about this model is it's an employment and training program. It's part of the workforce system, but you wouldn't go to your Department of Labor or HHS to get this started. You would go to your SNAP agency, and that's really where things originate from. And again, some states are doing a great deal of this, like the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, and others are on a different pace. They have fewer providers available, but really this is something that the state SNAP agency takes the initiative on and has a process for bringing people on. So I believe that's all of the questions. There might have been a couple other things that came in that were fairly detailed and might be difficult to answer just in this format. So anyway, I will just put out one more time. If there are other questions, you can unmute yourself. You can ask a question in person. We can, if you have one. Okay. If not, I guess the last thing I wanted to do is just turn things back over to the team from North Dakota, and just check with you, Deb or Michelle, if you have any final comments or any final words today. for the group?
We don't. We just want to thank everyone who's participated in this for participating and appreciate the interest.
Great. Thanks. Good. Yeah, and again, I hope this was helpful to everybody. I think it's good information for people to have. You know, it's a national program. You're welcome to go to the Snap to Skills website. You just, you know, go to Google, type in Snap to Skills. You can get a lot more information about the model. And, you know, and again, I'm Nick Koch from Seattle Jobs Initiative, but if you have any follow-up questions, you want further information, you could check with either Deb or Michelle. We've got their information right here. So, so thanks everybody for being on today. I appreciate everybody muting themselves and, you know, staying quiet, so it went very smoothly. And enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. So thanks.